Denis is a pragmatic IT service management leader, leveraging over 25 years of IT experience with proven success in both corporate and nonprofit organizations. He is an ITIL expert and excels at developing sound strategies and implementing people-focused processes to improve the quality and reduce the cost of delivering IT services. Denis is a highly accomplished, results-oriented team builder who develops strong relationships with executives, staff, and clients through open communications and commitment. Good morning, Denis.
Morning, Karen. Thank you very much for that nice introduction. And I want to thank ITSM Academy for giving me this opportunity to talk about something that I really enjoy, continual service improvement. I certainly want to also thank everyone who's taken time out of their schedules for this webinar, and I hope you'll find it worthwhile. Here's a little bit more information about me and a picture for it. Another service management fact about me is I earned the ITIL Manager Certificate back in 2001. I've been doing IT service management my entire career, including my development years, and utilizing ITIL for the past 15 years. A fun fact about me is I enjoy roller coasters, and this fall my son and I will be making our 10th annual pilgrimage to Cedar Point, the roller coaster capital of the world. If you haven't been there, it's in northern Ohio. If you like roller coasters or want to learn more about roller coasters, that is the place to go. All right, here is what I'm going to be covering today. All right, I'm going to first talk about what is CSI. And just to give a foundation about it, we're going to not spend too much time on why do CSI, because we've got a very, again, progressive group that already has that pretty well focused at their organizations. Then we will do I want to do a review of the ITIL's approach to CSI, because it's a very effective 6-step high-level approach to addressing CSI in your organizations. And then I want to talk about what I have found to be some very pragmatic, effective ways to get the ball rolling in groups, in your organizations, getting continual service improvement rolling and starting to build that culture up that really it becomes part of the norm for everyone. Talk about a few common challenges that organizations run into when doing continual service improvement, and then we've got a couple examples that I want to talk through of some areas and approaches that have worked successfully in doing continual service improvement without a whole lot of money or dollars for it. After that, do a quick summary on the key takeaways from my perspective on how you can get CSI rolling in your organizations, and then definitely want to leave some time at the end for your questions, because that's, I think, where the real value is. Really want to give you some ideas, some techniques that have worked that I think are very successful, but then your questions about, well, how might that work in yours, or anything to clarify about what I've talked about. All right, so first off, what is continual service improvement? What are we talking about when we're talking about continual service improvement, at least from my perspective? At a high level, 3 key things. Talking about improving the value of our services, the services we're providing for our customers. How can we continually improve how those services are providing value for the customers? And in addition to that, that's the key driver, right? And in addition to that, it's about, well, how do we improve our effectiveness and efficiency? Right? Effectiveness is really about doing the right things, doing those things that are going to provide value for our customers. And then efficiency is about doing the right things. Doing the things right. I get that. Effectiveness is doing the right things. Efficiency is doing the things right. So that talks about minimizing the resources and time needed to do our activities and processes, leveraging things like lean principles to eliminate waste, eliminate things that really aren't necessary, aren't adding value to the things we're doing and providing for our customers. And if you haven't already seen Donna Knapp's Leveraging Agile and Lean to Transform Your IT Organization webinar from last fall, I highly recommend you go to the archives and view it for some great techniques to improve efficiency and effectiveness. So why do CSI? Why do Continual Service Improvement? And again, I won't spend too much time on here because it sounds like the vast majority of the organizations here understand the importance of that, but it's really about, high level, right, maintaining the value of your services. If we keep delivering the same services, the same thing we've been delivering, what happens? The value of those services to your customers actually decreases. Well, we're providing the same thing, we're doing it really well, the value's going down. Why? Well, because we know that one thing that's constant in life and in business is that things change. And so what our customers, need to do, what their goals, objectives, and what they're trying to do is changing. And if we keep delivering and doing the same thing, then actually the value of our service is going down. So if we're not improving, by default, we are going to be delivering less value over time. So at a minimum, we need to be improving to maintain the value of our services, and hopefully we can find ways to actually improve and increase the value of our services over time, and that's a key driver in there. As that driver, it's also, though, and I always like to say, the scope applies to everything. It is all the ways we're working internally in the organization and the handoffs and the activities we're doing there. So, improving teamwork so that we can increase the value of what we're delivering for our customers. And I'll say the other thing about continual service improvement, if you're encouraging participation by everybody, it really helps to improve employee morale. It really shows that you value your employees and you're looking for ways to make their jobs easier, more effective, and the key improvement ideas are usually where people are having stumbling blocks, issues, things aren't clear between each other, and those are the kinds of things that can really, if you're addressing them, really improve employee morale. All right, so I do want to review. This is ITIL's Continual Service Improvement approach. Again, there's some of the foundation here to just review those 6 steps, because I think, although they're fairly simple, they really are a great approach and a way to be looking for and getting continual improvement going in your organizations. So, number 1, what is the vision? The first thing that's really important to do is that high-level, big picture. Make sure we understand what are the goals, what are the objectives that our customers, the people we're delivering services for, what is it that they're really trying to do? What is their overall mission, goals, and objectives? And then, once we understand that, then what is it we're trying to do as a service provider organization to provide value, to help them achieve those goals and objectives? And so to understand the big picture, I like to say the 50,000-foot level strategy vision, so we can set the context of where we want to focus our improvement opportunities. It's too easy, I'll say, to focus on, well, here's a pain point, here's an issue that is occurring or something we can improve and go ahead and do it, but it doesn't really add much value to what we're providing for our customers. Yes, we improved what we're doing, but it didn't help us big picture in what we're really trying to do in delivering value for our customers. So that's a key first step. And again, it's an easy one to shortchange because, you get a squeaky wheel, you go fix the squeaky wheel. Well, before you, decide what you're really going to do, take that big picture strategy, look at what it is your customers are trying to achieve, and then what you're trying to do to help them with those achievements. All right, so get that done first, and then start looking at, okay, so if we understand now the big picture, the 50,000-foot level, now we need to take an assessment to say, okay, where are we now? And make sure we understand what is it we're doing, how are we supporting, providing the value that our customers are coming to us for, and what's our vision, strategy, where are we trying to go, and what are we trying to do as a service provider. So to then clearly lay out, okay, well, here's where we are now in comparison to our vision of what we want to be as a service provider for those customers, existing and or potential future customers that we're looking at. And then the third step is going to be, well, where do we want to be? What incremental step do we want to take on our journey towards our vision? And we need to set, as very important, is to set measurable targets, objectives for that incremental step on our journey towards our vision of what we're trying to be, where we're trying to go in there. So prioritize what it is our next highest priority on our journey or under the vision, the overall strategy. The fourth step, all right, now, how are we going to do that? How are we going to make the step? And so we need to lay out, plan some objectives of how we are going to actually make that incremental step on where we want to be on our journey towards the vision, and start then executing against that plan. And then the fifth step, did we get there? Take some more measurements and see, are we reaching those objectives we're setting out? And then the very important step from a continual service improvement approach, and the whole idea of getting this built into the culture, is number 6, how do we keep the momentum going? How do we keep this front and center with all the other priorities that people have, so that we can ensure that once we get this ball rolling, it doesn't stop anywhere. It just keeps a nice, consistent momentum down the hill of continually improving the value we're providing for our customers. All right, so that's the review on the ITIL Continual Service Improvement approach. Again, a high-level view on deciding and making sure it's clear. You need to clearly understand, again, what is it you're trying to do, your vision, strategy for your customers. All right, so getting the ball rolling, and here's more of the Denis take on some of that. So getting the ball rolling, you clearly need to understand what your customers value. And again, I think everybody is at different points with that, but that's a really important one. And I'm going to say, we need to get beyond, often when we talk about, what our customers value. Well, they value the availability of our services, the performance of our services, how quickly we respond when there are issues. And yes, that is all important, and we need to do that. But we also need to take it to the next level and really look at what are those specific business outcomes they're trying to achieve, and how are we helping them with the services we're providing to better achieve those objectives. Because again, that's why they're going to come to us, and that's why they're going to provide funding to us, is because we're increasing their performance and helping them better achieve their outcomes. So we need to again, can't let go of those things like availability of services, performance, responding when there's an incident, and all those kinds of things. But we also need to clearly understand what are the key business objectives they're trying to achieve, how are the services we're providing that they're going to provide us funding for, and that's the key reason that they're going to give us funding, is not because of the availability of services and performance, it's because it is helping them better achieve their business outcomes. So we need to clearly understand that first, and that's a key driver. Again, to have that as that driver, that I'll say, high level understanding and perspective to help us prioritize improvement opportunities. So that's number one. And make sure that, again, you communicate that with the whole organization, whether this is, the team, a sub-team of a handful of people, or whether, you're driving it for a large organization across, an IT organization of 1,000 people, wherever level, you want to make sure everybody understands what is it the customers value, no matter where they are in the overall chain of services we're providing. Then, so we've got that, now we want to set some clear goals and objectives that people can really see and that we have clear measurements on. Because the only way we're going to be able to improve is if people really have some clear metrics, clear things they can follow and understand. And if it's all, well, we need to improve, we need to be, better customer service, those are all good terms, but unless you have clear metrics, measurable goals and objectives, it's really hard to really keep that ball rolling because everybody kind of interprets differently whether we're providing and how to provide better customer service and all that. So that's number two. Number three, got to have someone who's accountable, right? And that really applies in any kind of initiative, but including continual service improvement. Someone needs to be accountable who is essentially responsible to make sure continual service improvement is getting addressed as we want it to in the organization. And if it's just, well, everybody is responsible for continual service improvement, and certainly everybody certainly has a role, but you need to set one person accountable who's going to be monitoring how are we doing on what our goals and objectives are, how are we doing in identifying and implementing improvement opportunities. You need to set one person accountable for. And again, this could be, per work group. If you're in a large organization, you're trying to spread it out across the whole large organization. It could be in each work group you set someone who is accountable for continuous service improvement there, but then you want to have one person overall for the organization. And then another key thing, and I'm all about simple, is how are we going to collect the ideas, right? In the old days, old days, right? You might have a suggestion box on administrator's desk or something like that. Today, we want to have a simple way to collect ideas, and typically that might, be an electronic. It could be if nothing else, an email box that people can email to, or certainly, a web form, something like that. But you need to have a simple way to collect the ideas that people have, and that also will get more participation in the improvement initiatives. Look for some quick wins. How to get this ball rolling, we got to show people that yes, we are open to improvement ideas, and not only open, but we can implement them. So we want to get some quick wins and communicate those out to the whole organization, so everybody knows, hey, look it, this is a priority. Look, it can be done. We can do it. And to get that ball rolling, right, is some quick wins. Keep and communicate. Let everybody know, hey, here's what we've done. Here's the improvement, and that will get the ball rolling and started for continual service improvement. What are some of the common challenges? I'm going to say the three key ones that I have experienced and see are, number one, again, that lack of knowledge around customer impacts priorities. And we do, again, getting above maybe the technology, well, we're focused on service availability, and we're focused on, incident resolution time and all those things. And those are, again, we can't let go of those. We need to be managing those. But we really need to understand how do the services we provide impact our customers. Why are they giving us money for those services? What is their goals and objectives for the services we're providing? How do they utilize them in completing their goals and objectives? And what are their priorities around what they're trying to do from, again, I'll say from the business perspective, and that they're looking for us for those IT tools and services to help them be more effective. And that's a common challenge because, again, we often kind of get down in our technology that we have to do. We have to make sure we're taking it to the next level. And if we don't know that, right, that's something we're going to have the dialogue with our customers to understand it. And of course, the other key is it's not a once and done thing. It's not like we have set up a couple meetings, have a couple lunches, because again, we know it's going to be changing their priorities, the pressures they're under, the things they're trying to achieve. So we need to make sure to do effective continual service improvement that we're having a regular dialogue and we understand clearly what those customer priorities, impacts are, how they're changing, and what they are currently and where they're moving towards. So that's a common challenge, thing we need to clearly do to do effective continual service improvement. The second one, say, is a competitive culture. And I'm all about sports. And sports, right, a lot of it and a lot of things you see in media is about, I win, and when I win, they lose. Right? There's a winners and losers. And that can be a challenge to getting continual service improvement really embedded and rolling in your organizations. Because if it's about the individuals in our organization competing, like, well, it's about if I do better, maybe I'll get the promotion, and if I can make them, one way to make me look better, right, unfortunately, in some cultures is to make someone else look worse. And if I make them look worse, or if there's some way I can do that, that'll make me look better. And that's what I call this competitive culture inside the organization. And we really need to be moving towards, the cooperative. And I still like to use the sports analogy, but there it's the team, right? The team, the football team, the baseball team, the soccer team needs to work together. They've all got their individual roles, responsibilities, but the best teams you'll see are not necessarily, I'm going to say, the most skilled players or the highest paid players on those sports teams. It's the ones in most sports that work together best, that don't individually try to hog all the ball time. Now again, they all have great skills, and but if the teams where you see one person, another trying to hog all the ball time, is typically not the ones that really succeed. It's the ones that are more cooperative, more giving, and when some of those higher skilled players get a lot of defense, the other team around them, they pass it off, and guess what? Well, then you score quicker because everybody's focused over there, and it's a teamwork. So that's a common challenge. It is, because it's a lot of it in I'll say in our culture is around competitiveness and every person for themselves and things. And so a common challenge is working on that teamwork in there. And then the other one is, I'll say, measuring the value of improvements, that we need to be able to measure and follow up on the value of improvements. And what I mean there is, what I've done and I've seen a lot of times is, well, we come up with an idea, we've got a pain point or an idea for an improvement, we go ahead and implement it, but then we never, and we say, hey, great, we did that, we're so much better, but we don't actually measure, well, how did that actually improve the value that we're providing? Was it in efficiency for the customer? Was there actually some additional dollar value to the customer? And I say that's a challenge, is to make sure we are, and you can't always, but in most cases you can, and you want to tie it back and really measure the value that that improvement has made to, again, either your customer or it could be to us, the organization, and how we've eliminated some waste, some time we were wasting on steps that really aren't necessary. So those are common challenges. All right, let me talk now about some examples. And hopefully, again, that'll help you with some ideas on some ways that you might be able to get that ball rolling in your organizations without a whole lot of dollars. All right, so the first one I want to talk about is a corporate IT service desk. Right, this was a 30-person IT service desk supporting 6,000 employees of a Fortune 500 energy company. And when I became manager of the service desk, I'd been with the organization for a number of years, and I understood the business mission. The mission was to safely provide energy for consumers and collect the revenue necessary to safely provide that energy. That was, mission for the business. So then, very simply, our mission as the IT service desk was to help the organization's employees safely provide energy and collect the revenue necessary to do that through the use of IT services. And I'm all about keeping things simple, because from my perspective, when you have simple, short goals or objectives, it's much more effective and people can get on board with it much easier or much more quickly than when you spend a whole lot of time, and come up with I'll say a good, but very complicated, long-winded goals or objectives that try to cover all the exceptions that might come up and try to please everybody and all the different, exceptions they might come up with. I think the best, mission statements, the best goals are simple and short and clear. And then, we're going to deal with the details when we get into all the different procedures and things like that. But let's not complicate the goals and objectives, and that's how we can really get more people on board and keep it rolling. So we talk about this a little bit more. So the next step, we really assess, well, how are we doing on meeting that mission of helping employees safely provide energy and collect revenue? And we reviewed some of our key operational metrics we had. So we had a nearly 90% user satisfaction rate. We had a 65% closed on first contact rate at the service desk. And we had a 73% call answer rate. So as we looked at that and said, well, 90% user satisfaction rating seemed really good. 65% closed on first contact rate, being able to resolve users' issues right there, the first person they talked to, seemed pretty good. But that 73% call answer rate meant over a quarter of the people calling into our service desk hung up while waiting in the queue for us to answer their call. So I knew that right off the bat that wasn't very good. It wasn't really helping our employees, or at least those ones being dropped off. And of course, our 90% user satisfaction rating was based upon the people we worked with, because we didn't have a way to know who hung up and to follow up with them on whether they were satisfied or not. So we knew we needed to increase our answer rate and wanted to improve our closed on first contact rate, but we didn't have any budget for a major re-engineering effort or any new tools. So by necessity, we looked at what incremental improvements we could make to improve those operational metrics. So we set, by just setting some small goals, like, well, let's improve our answer rate by 5%. Our goal for next month is going to be, let's improve our answer rate by 5%. And then the process that we set up for helping us do that, really our continual improvement process, was we opened up the ability for everyone to submit improvement ideas by emailing those in for inclusion on the agenda of our weekly staff meetings. and then we'd get some initial feedback. Just spend a couple minutes on any idea. If we got some initial feedback, sounded good by the team, then we'd assign someone, usually the person who submitted the idea, to work out a plan on how we would implement that idea. And then that plan would be distributed before another staff meeting, and then we would have it reviewed at the staff meeting. If it all sounded good, we'd go ahead and implement it. Now, unexpectedly, this enabled two things. Number one, people felt more empowered. Right? Previously, it was more of, the supervisors, managers would kind of come up with the improvement ideas and come up and have somebody in charge, but it came from, I'll say, on high. So number one, people felt more empowered because they were given this idea to really share their idea, their improvement opportunities and ideas. And number two, our answer rate started improving before we even implemented our first change to any process or procedure of what we were doing. And I really believe this was because we had set an incremental, achievable goal, and individuals just started to focus on what small things they could do to help achieve that goal. Just by, again, setting clear, measurable goals and objectives, it gave people some guiding lights to make decisions and to look for just things they could individually do before we even started implementing improvement opportunities. As a new manager, I came in and I'm a very process-focused person. Documenting what you're going to do with clear roles and responsibilities, and then follow through and deliver on what you've documented. One of the first things I found was we had some really talented people on our service desk, but we didn't have a lot of documentation on our processes and procedures. So a key improvement initiative that we then took on and didn't cost a lot of additional dollars, it took time, but not additional dollars, was to update the existing documentation we had, which hadn't been updated in over a year, and actually start documenting more fully the things we were doing, because they really just had some rudimentary documentation around there. The other thing, in addition to what we were doing, we put together and documented a consistent training program for the service desk analysts. But previously, we were using a mentoring system that was working okay, but what new analysts received was very dependent upon who their mentor was. And another key thing I want to say about this one was we were running off an ACD system, an automated call distribution for handling calls. It was a subset of the corporate. The corporate had a call center, right, for end consumers and businesses. Well, we were running a subset of that. And, had no more budget for any additional things, but we had no visibility into the real-time wait queue. How many people were waiting, how long they've been waiting. We could get a monthly report at the end of each, well, actually at the end of each day, week, month, but we couldn't tell real time. So I called up the corporate call center and figured that can't be what they're doing, and found out they had some electronic boards that cost like $20,000 that we were able to tie in and show what the queue, how big the queue was and how long people were waiting. And we couldn't afford that. But we asked around and found they had one in a closet that was an older model that wasn't working, and we got someone who worked in the repair shop to take a look at it, and they found it was just one resistor that was blown. So we were able to get that at no additional costs from the corporate center other than that one resistor and put it up, and now people could see and could respond more quickly. So I want to say, the simple low-cost approach we used there was, right, understand our mission. What was our mission? It really was to help employees safely provide energy and collect the revenue necessary to do that through the use of IT services and enable them to do that. then to set some clear goals. And we just set small incremental goals, encourage participation, getting everybody the opportunity to do that, and then communicate it. It was at every weekly staff meeting, we had a part of the agenda that was about reviewing, new improvement ideas and any plans to get feedback on that. And in 18 months, we increased our answer rate from 73% to 94%, and our closed on first contact rate went from 65 to 82%. No additional staff. Our call volume actually went up slightly over that time, but we had no additional staff and really no out-of-pocket costs other than for that getting that board repaired so we could see what the real time was in there. All right, next up, I want to talk about working with a nonprofit group and some different challenges, but really some very similar types of things to get the ball rolling. So talking about a nonprofit annual conference for over 1,000 IT service management professionals, and we had a 20-person volunteer committee that was in charge of all of the content for the conference in there. And I came in and was given the opportunity to chair that conference and conference committee, and thought, okay, well, let's look at where we are. Big picture, again, what is our mission? What are we trying to do? Well, our mission really was around, they called learn, share, and grow. It was really, how do we provide the most value for the attendees of the conference? And, it was a lot of IT professionals, it was a lot of IT service providers, and how do we provide the most value for those through the content where they get opportunities to learn, share, and grow around IT service management best practices. So went into that group, and there was a couple of key things, right? These are volunteers now. You don't have those reporting relationships, paychecks, those kinds of things. You've got volunteers, and we want to look at ways to improve and work together better. So knowing our mission, also knowing we need participation, we just set up, or I set up, clear roles and responsibilities and actually documented what were the roles and responsibilities. That hadn't been done before, with some clear objectives, including, you needed to have some measurable things. So most objectives were help to pick the best presentations and things like that, but one was, clear measurable was you needed to attend and participate, actively participate in committee meetings, and we had a specific time and date, it was like a bi-weekly meeting on a Friday, and they had to participate no less than 80% of the time. And then they had to sign off and say yes, and list the responsibilities. So it was clear, and there were some measurable goals and objectives for them in that. And then it was opening up, and again, it was very similar. Once we've documented roles and responsibilities, some clear goals and objectives, it was then opening up and having an easy way. They could email me, because we didn't have other tools, right? As a volunteer group from across, virtually from across the U.S., they could email me anytime they have an improvement idea, and I individually talked with each one about what their improvement ideas were for the conference and the conference committee, and then we'd always talk about that, as part of the agenda for our bi-weekly meetings about improvements, and we prioritized. Now, we didn't continue. This was a 1-year time commitment, so this was more of prioritizing and then implementing once we've gotten the input from everybody in the organization. And so I just wanted to talk about in there, the other key thing was they didn't have documented, or we didn't have documented as an organization, any of the process procedures that the conference committee needed to do. So again, it took quite a bit of time, and it was all volunteer time, but we got a couple key people who went ahead and documented and put together a handbook for the conference committee of documented procedures for it. So again, it greatly improved the consistency and the quality because it wasn't just each individual track chair doing their own thing in their track. We documented and laid out and laid templates out, so it was much more efficient. People didn't have to figure it out, especially if they were new. We had it all documented for them. And lastly, the other example I want to share here, and I know we're getting starting to run out of time, but another example is one that I didn't participate in, but is really hits on all of those key tenets that I think really are going to be successful or helpful in getting continual service improvement rolling in an organization. So I want to share it with you. I like it. It's simple, it's straightforward, and it includes participation. And so it's a marketing company, has about 200 people, over a little 200 people in it. And what they do is they've got a process, which is somebody has an idea for an improvement, for something. They need to get 12 other people to support it. So you need 12 other people to sign on to say, yep, I think it's a good idea as well. At that point, they create a one-page proposal that goes to their leadership committee of the company, the organization, and they then review it, and either if they approve it, then it'll go into implementation, or they may not approve it. Now the nice thing, one of the nice things I think that makes this simple and really participatory is they have this set up on a bulletin board in a very prominent place. So you can see what the ideas are and where they are in the process. If they've gone to the executive committee, or if they haven't gotten 12 people, and the way people say they like the idea is they just put a sticker with their name on the idea on that board. And if it, there's time period, if it doesn't get the 12 people, then it goes to the graveyard of, okay, I didn't have enough support behind it. But the other thing that happens here is, so it's very visible because everybody sees these and sees it. The other thing is, if the leadership committee says no, then it will go back to the board, and then the people who support it, if they still think it's a good idea, if they still think it's valid, then they can promote it, and it would go to a vote of all the employees. And if the majority of the employees vote for it, then it'll go into implementation in there. Otherwise, either on the vote, or even if they decide, well, no, it's it's okay, then it goes into that graveyard, and they keep that list up on the board as well, so they know, and people aren't resubmitting ideas that have already been hashed through. So that, I think, is simple, it's visible, it's a great way to get everybody involved. And at the end of the slide deck, I do have a link to a blog posting that talks about that in more detail, because I think that's a great, to me, simple, very employee-focused and visible way to get that continual service improvement ball rolling. All right, so what are the key takeaways from this? From my perspective on how do you get continual service improvement, the ball rolling? So number one, again, you need to understand what your customers value and understand that that's going to be constantly changing. So you need to have, as part of what you're doing is understanding clearly what your customers value, how that's changing above, right, those things around availability of services, performance, consistency. Yes, we need to do all that, but we also need to understand how it really enables them and what they value and why they're giving us money, why they're providing funding to us for those services. Set clear, measurable goals and objectives, right, and keep them simple if you can. You need to include everybody. Continual service improvement is not, it needs to have, I'll say, top-down sponsorship, but it needs to be an everybody cooperative effort. If it is a top-down, then it's just going to happen when it comes down from the top. It's not going to be continual. It's only going to be whenever it comes down. So you got to encourage participation in it. Keep it simple and short, right? KISS, keep it simple and short, because that's much easier for people to get together, to gather around, and make progress on. Measure the value where you can, and they, in that last one I talked about, they measure value and the costs, actually, and put it up on the board as well. So make sure, and not always can we, sometimes it's just going to be some things, there's some internal team building things, that's okay. If we can't measure it in dollars, maybe we can measure it in some user satisfaction, some employee satisfaction kind of surveys, but try to measure the value. And then it's about communicate. It needs to be part of the regular, staff meetings, any kind of regular communications you have internally. It just needs to be there so that people realize, yeah, this is a regular part of what we need to do. We really need to do this. And again, these kinds of things doesn't mean we need a new tool, doesn't mean we need a lot of money, anything like that. All right. Questions. Karen, do we have any questions?
Hi, Dennis. Yes, we do have questions. So, but first of all, thank you for that. A lot of good nuggets in there. I really like that presentation. A lot of good things that we can easily implement. So thank you. And just before we start the Q&A, and if anybody has any additional questions, please chat them in now. Would be great. But just before we start the Q&A, because I know some of you have to drop off at noon, I'd just like to remind everyone that the next webinar is scheduled for Thursday, August 20th, when Lisa Hodges of Cornerstone Service Management joins us. Lisa's presentation is titled ITIL plus Prince2 equals success. And Lisa will explain how Prince2, the most widely adopted project management approach in the world, offers a proven practical approach to organizing, managing, and executing ITIL process improvement projects. So we look forward to having you join us for that. And I also, I just wanted to remind you that we will continue to bring you practitioner presentations. Dennis shared a lot of information when he was a practitioner and what he was doing in implementing processes. And I know a lot of you are in the midst of doing implementations, and some of you have challenges and haven't been able to start that. And people want to hear that. People want to hear, what the challenges have been and what the successes have been. And so, doesn't always have to be perfect. Absolutely not, because it never is. So if you'd like to share your implementation experience, or you'd like to share your implementation challenges with us, please let us know, and I'd be happy to work with you to make that happen at one of our webinars. So I just wanted to remind you about that. And now my colleague, Eric Montijo, is here to share some information with us today. Hello, Eric.
Hey, Karen, how are you doing today?
Great. How are you doing?
Doing good, doing good. Hey, I want to thank you for the intro, and thank you, Dennis, for presenting today. Really great, and I love the presentation. I'd love to hear you speak again. So it's interesting. Continual service improvement is a very important part of the life cycle, and it's important to note that the only class that will teach you about it is the life cycle course, CSI. So if you'd like to learn more about continual service improvement, we do have a class coming up September 28th. Funny enough, this class is eligible for our Lifecycle Summer School sale. The sale is buy one, get one free Lifecycle courses with the coupon code SUMMERSCHOOL on our website. Lifecycle classes span either half days or partial week, so you can get back to work and life a little bit faster. We invite you to check out CSI with a teammate or take 2 classes for the price of 1. So that's all I have. Thanks again, Dennis, for the presentation, and back to you, Karen.
Thank you, Eric. I didn't know CSI was covered under that, so that's great for our listeners today. Thank you. And Dennis, we did have a couple of chats on the question of the CSI culture and what it was like under the other. And interestingly, we have 2 attendees, both named Greg today, and one Greg said, he said, the other was, improvement is okay if you do it in your spare time. And our other Greg said, failure is okay unless it causes an outage.
Right.
In that culture. So I just wanted to make sure you had that feedback as well.
Nice, thanks.
So thank you both for sharing that information with us. Okay, so I have a question from Derek. And Derek wants to know what specific information should be recorded around CSI initiatives. what mediums are typically used. And you mentioned a couple of them in your presentation, but maybe you could kind of address that for Derek as to what you commonly see.
Now help me there when we're talking or referencing mediums.
Yeah, so if we're going to, what information should be recorded on the CSI initiatives, and how is it being recorded?
Okay, right. So I think, again, the clear thing, and where you can, and again, sometimes, and again, I think improvement ideas to help the team environment and things that are going on sometimes don't have direct connection. But where it can, we really want to be measuring how is this impacting our customers, the value of the services we're providing. And so that's where, you know, a good one is, you know, dollars. How is it helping them? Because their goals and objectives of the customers, right, are probably, as it was at the electric company, was to provide energy safely and collect the revenue necessary to do that. So how is it that it's either, you know, enabling your customers to do their objectives, which translates into revenue, you know, how's it the dollars, or including how does it improve our efficiency, effectiveness of how we are doing things inside the organization. And again, my thought, the only way it really works is if you can get some clear, definable measurements in there, be it dollars, be it, you know, we were, you know, talking about the answer rate, right? There was a very clear, measurable objective that was helping us with our mission of supporting and enabling the employees to safely deliver energy and collect the revenue for it. But if it's not specific and measurable, then I'm going to say, and of course it's going to vary depending on what types of services you're providing and everything, but if it's not specific and measurable, then it's really not going to help get that ball rolling, because then it's going to be unclear to people, what is it we're really trying to do? How are we really achieving improvements if we don't have measurements for it?
Thank you, Dennis. Yep, absolutely. You have to know what the target is and how you're measuring it, how you're doing against that. Derek had another question for you. What techniques can be used to prioritize CSI initiatives, taking into account budget and resource constraint realities?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's one of the most important parts. You know, that's a great question, because it is often we all have, and depending even whether it's a 3-person group or a 300-person group, we've got lots of ideas for improvements, and part of the challenge then is, oh yeah, so how do we prioritize this? Because we've got lots of ideas on ways to improve, or lots of areas where we have some pain points and we want to improve, but how do we prioritize them? And I think it has to get back to that first step of understanding what's the vision, to do that 50,000 foot, because too soon we jump into, well, here's the squeakiest wheel, here's the biggest pain point or whatever. We need to know first and do that 50,000 foot, that, what's the big picture vision, strategy, goals and objectives. So you need to have that first, so that can be the driver. And then I'm going to say it gets back to, once you got the big picture, to know what is it we're really trying to achieve, then you need to drill into, and as I said, where you can, it's identifying cost savings. And that's, either cost savings for customers, number one, cost savings for us, number two, in dollars and cents. It can be time savings, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be dollars. It can be savings to improve our performance without increasing any costs, because that can be seen as additional value if we can provide a higher performance at the same cost for customers. So that is a key. That's a great question. And I think, again, you need to get it down to where you can, where is that value in dollars and cents for customers, number one, then for us and what we're doing in working together in delivering the services.
Good, thank you. Thank you, Dennis. Heather has a question, and she said, when you implemented your incremental changes, did you also advertise this to the customers and the end users?
That's a good question. So, like with the service desk, we didn't initially. We did not publicize what we were doing, and in some ways, especially in some ways, I'll say I was a little bit ashamed of our answer rate, and didn't realize, that we were losing over a quarter of the people were hanging up in there. So I wanted to kind of, I'll say, improve our some of those key objectives and goals before communicating them. But then we did. Once we got them up where the answer rate was over 80%, then we started publishing them on a website, intranet website that the employees could see, because we wanted to show, here's what we're doing. And the good news was, because we were doing continual improvement, we were able to show, and we'd show the history then of how those things would go. And there'd be variations, but they realized and understood that some months it'd be a little lower, and maybe because there was some peaks in call volume, some extra outages or whatever. But yeah, I think it is very helpful, and it's a good motivator. It was another one of those motivators, just like that when the employees felt empowered because we were opening it up and making it a priority that we would seriously take everybody's ideas. That's another motivator when they know, hey, we're communicating how we're doing for them and everybody to look for ways, because again, I think intrinsically everybody wants to do well. They just need some opportunities. We need to get some roadblocks out of the way and give them some opportunities to do well and to help us all improve on things we're doing and eliminate waste, eliminate steps that we don't need, and often those come from the people on the front lines, not from their managers or supervisors.
Right. Well, and oftentimes, too, do you find that, once you set the goals, and then when you see what's associated with the cost of maintaining that goal, sometimes you back that goal down a little bit, correct?
Yes, right. Because you really then need to look at it again. It gets back to kind of those priorities. Okay, and if trying to achieve that goal, there's other things that we didn't see. Kind of often there's that iceberg, right? Here's what we see, and then once we start trying to work on it, we find out, well, under the water, there's a whole lot more to it. And so, yeah, certainly we adjust goals and as necessary, and especially when we find out, yeah, this is an iceberg. It seemed pretty simple. This is like a great idea, but now we find out it's an iceberg. There's a whole lot of other things underneath the water, and because again, it should be a very positive thing, and that's kind of the other bonus I'll say at the end of the presentation. In addition to the link to the blog about that company and their continual improvement process, is a link to Raving Fans. I'm a big fan of Ken Blanchard and his books. He's got another book called Well Done. They're very simple, big picture, and Raving Fans and in Well Done, it's about, creating a positive and accountable. People have to be held accountable and responsible, but a very positive, more positive reinforcement rather than the negative. So again, if we laid out objectives that aren't obtainable, well, we want to readjust those and really ensure we're working towards things we can and keep that positive atmosphere.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Lori has a question. When you were talking about the documentation process that you went through, and she said that you were talking sort of along the lines of that updating the documentation didn't take a lot of dollars, only time. And she said, assuming that you did this with existing staff, you must have had to pay either overtime or their productivity and call taking time was reduced at a time when one of your goals was to reduce abandoned calls. And she's asking, did you capture the expense of documentation for that particular project? And can you explain how you, and can you explain how you did that? And she said, I understand the required investment was minimal compared to acquiring a new tool, but she's interested to know what the investment was overall.
Yeah. Now that's a great question. And again, this is a good progressive group. And actually, so we didn't have to pay overtime, and I'll say a lot of it was done on second, third shifts, but also during the first shift because, we were, as a service desk, we had peak periods and then we had down. So it was people would work on it on down, and we had a rotation in our service desk that those service desk analysts weren't always on the phones. And if you work in a service desk environment, it takes people with some special skills to be effective long-term on service desks. And part of what we did there was we had a rotation. So we had, essentially we called it 1.5 level, kind of a second level position. And that position then wasn't directly on the phones. They get things escalated to them, and they would have time there also to do, that included, personal training, and it included improvement opportunities. And so we scheduled, included part of that time was updating it, but also a good portion was done on second, third shifts, where there's times when second, third shift there would be a peak, and there could be a time easily where there'd be an hour that someone might not get a call, depending on what's going on in the second, third shifts. So we didn't, because we didn't have the money to pay overtime, and it's a good question, because again, how do you do that? We were able to do it with the existing staff on periods where they weren't actually, having to answer calls, which would include they might be on the phones, but the lull between the peaks, and in that rotational position we had that gave people time when they weren't always, every day, 8 hours a day, directly on phones.
And you said that took 9 months for that project?
It took about, well, no, I'm thinking it took a little less than that to get it all up and documented. It took us more around I think it was 5 months to get the documentation together, because what it was updating the old, but the old, it was very, I'll say it was kind of a skeleton. It was just a few things, and we really wanted to more fully document all the activities that we were doing in there, and also put together. Now, one person took the lead on the training program. We already had like a lead mentor that was in charge, a coordinator. It just wasn't documented. So it's like, okay, well, let's document this so it is more consistent between the training.
Okay, thank you. I have an interesting question from Derek. He's asking, what are the roles and responsibilities of a CSI manager, and is that a full-time role?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, of course, the answer is it depends, right? It depends on your organization, how big it is. Now, we talked about a lot of organizations that were here were, over 700. That was the vast majority. We're greater than 700. So there, in an organization like that, my expectation would be it would be a full-time role in an organization like that, because you're really going to be working with a lot of other people that have roles and responsibilities to help the lead in their work groups. But of course, in a small organization, we still had a good, I'll say a quarter of them, right, were 100 people or less in the IT organization. And in there, I would expect it would not be a full-time role. It would be a role of many that somebody's going to have in the organization. Most likely, again, my recommendation, it would be someone that is a manager, so has some leadership and some pull in the organization, because it really needs to go across. But I'll say again, from like my service desk, we didn't have, it wasn't a departmental really initiative. So we were a 30-person team, right, in our organization, and we really just did it inside there, and did not have the rest of the organization at that point in time was not on board. And the IT organization was about, with contractors, the IT organization was about 500 So we were 30 people out of 500 in the IT organization. And so we had the CSI manager, it ended up being one of my roles, right, accountable to ensure that that continual service improvement stayed on the agenda and that we were making it visible and tracking the ideas, the improvements, and all that. So it was one of my roles as the service desk manager, but it certainly was only one of many roles and responsibilities I had as a CSI manager. But again, you gotta understand and look at, and each, unfortunately, again, no black and white answer. It's really going to depend on your organization and the size and what you can really devote towards it. But it's just critical that somebody has that accountability. I think that's the key thing. And whether it's a full-time role or part-time, part of that gets down to budgeting as well.
Of course, sure, that would. I have a lot of comments in here for you as well. You know, what a great job. I love this presentation. A lot of people are sharing the same comments that Eric did as well. So great job. Thank you so much. I can use this information, so I just want to share that with you as well, Dennis.
Great, thanks. I'm glad people found it helpful.
I have one more question. So if anybody else has any other questions, please chat them in now. I have a question from Hoy, and his question is, he said, can you speak to leadership changes and CSI? And he's talking about, like, from the culture standpoint. I'm sorry, her, she, I'm so sorry. From a culture standpoint, how does leadership changes affect CSI? So, you know, it could be from top down or not, or it could be vice versa, from bottom up, and potential cultural shifts. So what have you seen in organizations when there's been a change in leadership that has affected CSI?
Well, I think my perspective that it is leadership is either going to make it or it's not going to work. And actually, that's why in the poll question, I was very encouraged to see. I've been in a lot of organizations that were of the culture of don't make mistakes. You know, you have to do what you're doing perfectly. And if anybody makes a mistake, oh, that's a black mark on in your little book. And I was so glad to not see that, because I think, and again, that's kind of that competitive thing too, is, oh, well, you stumbled, you made a mistake. That means you're not as good as somebody who never, quote unquote, never makes mistakes. Well, we all make mistakes. And so to me, that leadership that is looking at and accepting that, yes, as we try to make improvements, sometimes we're going to try something that sounds like an improvement, and then we find that, you know, underneath the water there's a whole lot to it, and we actually, you know, go backwards, or something gets worse. We have a, you know, failure. That's okay, because we're not going to improve if we're in that culture, and the leadership top down is, you know, never make mistakes, do everything perfect so that everything's perfect in there. So from my perspective, and I'm hoping I'm answering the question, but the leadership is key, because it's really, and again, whether that leadership is at a supervisor level, a team leader level, or at the top, because I'll say with the service desk, again, it wasn't coming top down at that point. Luckily, over time, with some, actually, yes, with some leadership changes, that came in. But at that point, it was really just us, the service desk team of 30 people, that were doing it inside the organization of 500. But it is the difference. And when you have a leadership change, you could have built up a real good culture, and you have a leadership change, and the new leader is in more of a top-down, I'll say, as far as looking at changes, kind of that culture idea that, well, it's an improvement idea from management are the only good ones. No one else comes up with good ones, because that's, quote unquote, our job is to lead and come up with ideas. And it's the leader changes to that, then I think your ball rolling for continuous improvement will stop, because it really needs to permeate the culture. And how do you permeate the culture? It's got to be a leader who walks the talk, doesn't just say it. And I've been in organizations like that where, boy, they say all the right things, but then they don't walk the talk. So, you know, I think that is key. And the challenge being, if you're in an organization where the leaders aren't showing that, you know, it's really, again, all you can do then is, well, let's do what we can in our team, because we can do incremental things in our team, right? Don't cost, if it doesn't cost money, it's not going to add to the budget or whatever. It's things about how we're interacting, and we can even talk to other teams and how we're working with them and handing off. Usually, as long as it doesn't hit a budget impact, we can still make that happen, and we can still do continual improvement. Will it, you know, we'll be able to do bigger things where we can maybe get more return because we are able to spend money on re-engineering efforts, on maybe some new tools. Well, no, that might not happen, but we certainly still do things ourselves. But it all is about, well, it's that team leader or that supervisor that needs to have that continual service improvement and encouragement and empowerment for everybody working together.
Right. Great answer. Thank you. I mean, I think we've all seen when there's been proactive leadership and they've walked the talk and when they don't walk the talk, and how difficult that can be. Change is not easy, right? Change is not easy.
Right. And again, making continual service improvement, making anything, including continual service improvement, part of the culture, as part of the day-to-day. Hey, this is what we always need to do. It's very empowering. It's great to have, but to have it really be part of and continue ongoing, not just a one-time project, which a lot of times, you know, it can end up being a one-time project, for it to be ongoing. The leaders of, again, whatever part of the organization or the whole organization, it needs to come from the leaders down.
Mm-hmm. Yes, communication, right? Communicate, communicate, communicate.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you, Dennis. That was great. That was a great Q&A session. A lot of great questions. So thank you to all our listeners today. Those were just great questions. So thank you so much for that. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have today. But again, we will email you a link for the Q&A from this session in just a few days. And once again, I'd just like to remind you that our next webinar is scheduled for Thursday, August 20th, when Lisa Hodges of Cornerstone Service Management joins us with her presentation titled ITIL plus Prince 2 equals Success. And it's interesting when because Lisa was talking about, she's going to explain how Prince 2 offers a proven practical approach. And she was talking about how it's, you know, the number one well-known way to do things. And she's also a PMP, so I'm really interested to hear her take on that as well. I think that's going to be a very good webinar.